Hello, explorers, and welcome to Reach the World's Explorer program. For 25 years, Reach the World has inspired youth to become curious, confident, and compassionate global citizens through virtual exchange. My name is Tim, and I'm so glad you're joining us for today's live stream event. More than 3,600 years ago, the volcanic island of Santorini in Greece exploded. As one of the largest volcanic eruptions in history, this powerful blast blew the center out of the island, sending rock high into the sky and creating a tsunami that impacted the weather as far away as China. At the time, ancient civilizations hardly knew what to make of this world-shattering event. And if we fast forward to today, where we know that the Christiana, Santorini, and Colombo volcanic group in the Aegean Sea, which collectively is known as the Hellenic volcanic arc, is particularly hazardous because of what's happening far beneath the seafloor. To better understand the history of volcanic eruptions in this region, the Hellenic Arc Volcanic Field Expedition team is currently traveling aboard the scientific drilling vessel JOIDES Resolution into and around the flooded caldera of Santorini and some other sites to collect rock and sediment samples containing 3 million years of geological clues. It's all very exciting. The cool part is that you and I get to join this incredible expedition through this virtual exchange, and we've been receiving regular reports from explorer Sara Whitlock aboard the JOIDES Resolution, all of which you can find on her Expedition Journey homepage at the link I shared in the YouTube chat bar on the right-hand side of your screen. And even better, she's joining us live again today from the ship to show us what she and the expedition team have been up to since we last spoke. But before we welcome Sara, I want to give a very special welcome to the teachers and students around the world who are joining us live today or watching a recording of this event after the fact. For our live audience, please feel free to use the YouTube chat bar to let us know you're here, where you're joining from, and of course, at any point to share questions you have for Sara. We'll work them into our conversation today. All right. Without any further delay, it's time to reconnect with onboard education officer Sara Whitlock. Sara, I'm going to bring you up onto the screen here. Hello, welcome.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. I'm Sara. I've been on board the JOIDES Resolution for about a month now. It's crazy how fast it's been going by, and I'm really excited to share a couple things that I've been learning with all of you.
Fantastic. It's so nice to see you. And for anyone who's watching today, you know, especially if you've been following this virtual exchange, that Sara is on a ship. She is on the sea. The ship is at work drilling. So any sort of delay you hear in our conversation today, it's because this connection is really special. We are actually speaking to someone who's on a ship in the middle of an expedition, and that is our good friend Sara. So Sara, the last time we spoke to you, you were just about to leave port in Spain, and that was before many of us in the United States went on our holiday breaks from school, and we're back now. It's January. It's been almost a month since we've last spoken to you. Can you sort of walk us through what you've been up to since then?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the last time we spoke, we were in what was called port call. So we were hanging out on the boat while we were still in port. We were getting to know our new home. We were loading a bunch of food and supplies onto the boat, and we were kind of learning what we were going to be doing in the laboratories, or at least what the scientists were going to be doing in the laboratories. I do a lot of walking through the laboratories and working with the scientists, but I'm not doing the science myself. I get to work with all of you. So after we did that, then we sailed from Spain to the waters around Santorini. That took us about 5 days, and it was pretty exciting. We had some not terrible weather, but we had some bigger waves, so we got to see the ocean do a lot of different kinds of things. And then since then, we've drilled at 3 different sites next to 3 different underwater, well, actually 2 different underwater volcanoes so far, and 1 basin kind of next to the volcanoes. And soon we'll be sailing into Santorini, so the caldera where a big volcanic explosion happened and then collapsed. So now there's water on top of it with the little islands of Santorini around it. It's called the caldera. And we're going to be sailing in there really soon to start drilling right next to the islands. So I'm excited about that. It's going to be really beautiful.
That is amazing. You have traveled so far since we spoke to you last. Just from the voyage part, from when you left from Spain to Greece, and we're going to get into the drilling and the really neat scientific stuff that you're doing in Greece right now. But what was it like? I mean, I don't know how much time you've spent on ships before. You said it was a little wavy. Like, give us a sense of what it's like to live, sleep, eat, do all the things you do on a ship. You wrote a great article about what facilities are available to you as you live, and that ship is your home. But what's it like to be on a sort of rough, choppy sea, living, sleeping, doing all of your everyday things on the ship?
Yeah, that was really exciting. Like you mentioned, I haven't been on ships very much before. I've been on, little ferry boats and things like that, expeditions that might last an hour or something like that. But I've never lived on a ship for a long period of time before. And when I say that we got some bigger waves, they were about 3 meters tall. So that means they were probably around 9 feet tall, which, when you think about it, that seems kind of high. But even with our boat is very long, it's like 143 meters long. So it's a pretty big boat, which means that it's pretty stable most of the time. But one day in particular, the waves were kind of hitting us sideways, which means that our boat was rocking around kind of like this. So luckily, I did not get super seasick. Some of my friends did. But it was kind of funny because I was working at my computer trying to send emails and do research, and we were just rocking around like this. And you had to kind of brace yourself sometimes in the stairwells as the big waves hit the boat because it would rock back and forth quite a bit. So that was pretty interesting. We only had that for about a day, so that was fortunate. And one other funny thing was that when you're trying to sleep in those really big waves, it kind of feels like you're in a hammock. You're swinging back and forth. And I kind of had to wedge myself into my bed with pillows to make myself feel comfortable when the waves were that big. So, and we also, you mentioned that we have several different facilities in the boat that kind of make it more comfortable to live here. So one of those was a gym. And pretty much nobody could use the gym when the waves were that big because you don't want to be trying to lift weights when you're going to be swaying back and forth a lot.
That sounds like quite an adventure before you even got to the spot where you were drilling. Just being on a ship and getting used to land beneath your feet or surface beneath your feet that's always moving. We have a lot of great questions already pouring in from Miss Turney's class. Hi, Miss Turney's class. We're going to get to all of those questions and more, but you have prepared some slides, some pictures of this period of time since we last spoke to you. And I want to make sure and bring those up and let you sort of explain what they are, because I think it will address some of the early questions that students are putting into the chat. And as I bring that up, I'm also going to add the link to the rest of your amazing virtual exchange articles that you've been submitting from the ship. So if any of our classrooms who are following along haven't had a chance yet to catch up on the articles that you've been writing about your everyday life about aboard the ship, you can read a lot more at this link. I'm going to bring up your photos here, and I'm going to slide into the background, and you can just sort of walk us through what we're looking at, please.
Yeah, so this is a cool picture that we got from a boat that was sailing past of our ship, the JOIDES Resolution. So we're looking at the back end of the ship. That big circle that you can kind of see on the back is the helipad. We don't have helicopters that land very often. That would only be in case of an emergency, if somebody needs to go to the hospital for some reason. We do a lot of health and safety checks before we get on the boat, so that's pretty unlikely. And then if we move forward along the boat a little bit, you can see the big tower kind of in the middle of the boat. That's the derrick. So that's the machinery that holds up the drill pipes that we send down to the bottom of the ocean floor. And that drill pipe system is how we bring up what's called core samples from the ocean floor. And those core samples with sediments and rocks and muds are what the geologists on board the ship are studying. And then as you move even further forward on the boat, you can see a bunch of windows kind of in the white section that's towards the front. And that's where all of our laboratories are and where we live and eat and sleep. So maybe we can hop to the next slide. Oh yeah, this is a picture I tried to get of the stormier weather that we had. It's a little hard to take pictures of waves and see how big they are. I really tried hard. I took so many videos and so many pictures, but you can't really tell that these are big waves. But this was when we were having our 3 meter or 9 foot tall waves. And you can tell from the clouds and kind of the gloomy vibe that it was a little bit stormy that day. Then you can see up front, of course, the little wind sock that we have on the boat. So we can hop on to the next one. And then, of course, we mentioned that between when we talked last time and this time, we had our holiday break. So here on the boat, we did celebrate. We had to keep working because we only have 2 months on the boat, but we took a little bit of time off in the afternoons and the evenings on holidays to do some celebration. So this is a picture from a Secret Santa exchange that we did. We each brought very small gifts, mostly food items that we would all want while we're out here at sea. And we exchanged those, and a couple of people dressed up, and we had a lot of decorations. And I think on the next slide, you can see even a few more things. Here are all of our stockings. So there were 117 people on our boat in total, but every single one of us got a stocking with some little treats in it. These hung along the wall into our dining hall. So right as we went to have a big Christmas dinner, we got to pick up our stockings along the way. And I think on the next slide, you can see our Christmas dinner. So this is our wonderful staff of people who make the food for us every day. We actually have 4 meals every single 24-hour period because people work all around the clock. Most people work 12-hour shifts, and they usually work from either noon to midnight or midnight to noon. So every 3 or 4 hours, somebody is hungry and wants to eat a meal. So these are the wonderful people in the picture who are cooking all of those meals. It's a lot of work to feed that many people every single day without ever stopping. And on top of that, they put together, which you can see in the front, just a spectacular Christmas dinner. On the left side, you can see that there's a little ship sculpture that they made out of various types of fruits and vegetables. You can see in the back that there was a Christmas lechon, which is a traditional Filipino Christmas dish made with a whole pig that is cooked really slowly and has some herbs in it. And it was just an amazing Christmas celebration. So we can go to the next slide. Oh, here's a little bit closer up of a couple of the scientists who were on board with us. They were really excited about some of the sculptures, and we had a lot of fun taking a little break and eating. And we can go to the next one. Oh yeah, and because we were in the Mediterranean, we've been really fortunate with some great weather, even though it is the winter here. So on Christmas Day, you can see one of the scientists in this picture is wearing a little Santa hat. It was warm enough that we were able to sit outside. Some people didn't even have jackets on. And this is on the very top of the boat. So this is an area that we call the Steel Beach. It's kind of on top of the bridge where the captain is driving the boat. And there are a bunch of pool chairs up there because people like to lay out when it's nice weather like this and get some vitamin D. People don't always get to see the sun a lot when they're working because since they're working kind of staggered on the daytime, they'll either see the sunrise or the sunset. So it's really important when the sun is up while people are awake that they can get some vitamin D. So we can go on to the next slide. And then it was New Year's very quick soon after that. So we had a whole New Year's Eve celebration. We did a ball drop. You can see before we did the ball drop in this picture. And then in the next picture, you can see the ball as it's lit up and is kind of dropping down. We also had, I don't have pictures of this, but we did an ancient sailor's tradition on New Year's Eve where we had the youngest person on the ship ring the ship's bell 6 times to say, we had the oldest person on the ship ring the bell 6 times to say goodbye to the old year, and the youngest person ring the ship's bell 6 times to say hello to the new year. So that was very fun. The captain oversaw that whole process, and that was supposed to give everyone on board good fortune for the next year. So we can go on to the next picture. Oh, and we had a dance party too. It's important when you're working as hard as we are to take a little bit of a break and to have some ways that you can unwind. So there's a movie room on the ship also. It has a really good sound system and a really good light system. So I got some very blurry pictures of some friends dancing at the dance party. And then in the next picture, we set up a little photo booth for New Year's Eve. And you'll see that we have some 2023 New Year's glasses that I'm wearing right there. And actually, we 3D printed those while we were on board the boat because we all realized that we wanted something to celebrate and to take fun pictures with for the new year, but we obviously couldn't go to the store since we're out in the middle of the ocean. So we have a 3D printer on board, and we were able to download a file on the internet and make ourselves some glasses to celebrate. So we can go to the next picture. But most of what we've been doing while we're here is, of course, the science. So this is the person in the blue hard hat is the person who is overseeing all of our drilling operations. So he was teaching us here how the drill works a little bit and showing us some of the pieces of that. And if we go to the next picture, you can see some of the drilling pipe on the right side. Those are big pipes that go down to the ocean floor to bring back our samples. And then on the left side, you see what the bottom of the drill looks like. So that very bright, shiny part is the drill bit. You can sort of see that there are some little circles on there that have kind of pointy little grinding heads that chew into the mud and the rocks to kind of help us get down into the sediment. And we were replacing the drill bit here, which is why it's pulled all the way up to the top. So we can go to the next picture. And this is what the tubes that we bring full of muds and rocks from the bottom of the ocean floor look like on the left. You can see they're really, really long when they first come out. This is kind of a little catching station called the catwalk, where we put the samples right after they come from the ocean floor. And they get processed a little bit here. We take a couple samples. You can see this little bowl, and we take a couple samples right away to help us figure out how old the different core samples are. And then if we go on to the next picture, then this is a little bit, just a little slice of a couple of the things that we've seen so far. There have been a lot of different types of rocks, and some of the ones that are a little bit more pebble looking are actually pummices that are the products that were produced by volcanic eruptions in the past. And one really fun one is if you look at the layer that it's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 little slices over from the right. You can see one that's kind of brown with these big white streaks through it. That one is called a bioturbated ooze. And the funny part is those little brown streaks are actually from worms that wiggled through the sediment when it was forming. And they pooped out that white part from a different layer. So they ate dirt from one section and they pooped it out in that section. And that's why it's given the fancy name bioturbated ooze, but that's how it got that funny little streaked pattern. So we can go on to the next. I think that actually might be my last slide. Oh, no, one more. There we go. And here, this is just another example of some of the harder rocks that we found in this expedition so far. They're very beautiful. They have a lot of different colors, and it's fun. It's kind of a mystery when one of these new core samples comes up. We don't really know what we're going to see when we split it open. So that's been a lot of fun.
Wow, Sarah, that is amazing. You've been doing so much since we sort of spoke to you last. I'm glad you described those rocks as beautiful. I think they're really pretty too, the different layers that you've brought up. I know that they give us a lot of clues about what has happened in the past in that region of the world, but they're also just stunning to see the different patterns. And it's nice to know that at least one of them is mostly worm poop.
Yeah. I couldn't believe it when I found that out. I thought it was so silly.
I am very happy to share that we've got at least 2 classes joining us today, and many others who are sort of silent observers at this moment at least, but 2 of our classes, including Miss Turney's class and Miss Stevens' class. Hi, Miss Stevens, 2nd graders, welcome. They're just pouring in questions for you. So I thought maybe before we go much further, we could get to some of these great questions coming in from students. You talked a little bit about what a caldera is. Norman would like to just hear it maybe one more time. What exactly is a caldera? We talk about the caldera of Santorini.
Yeah, that's a great question. It can be a little bit hard to explain right out the gates. But yeah, so we have these volcanoes under the water, right? And when they explode, a lot of magma comes out. So a lot of volcanic products come up out of the earth when a volcano that's underwater explodes. And all of those bits of magma and other things that were underneath the earth before the volcano exploded were holding the land above it up. So when all that comes out, lots of the land that was underneath the water kind of caves in and falls down, because it's like, you can imagine if you squeeze out a balloon, like it's a balloon of magma underneath the earth. And when you squeeze it out, the balloon is flat. And so everything above it kind of falls down. And the part that's fallen down, once the magma balloon kind of explodes out, that's what's called the caldera. So in Santorini's case, the land that fell down used to be above the water, but after the explosion happened, the magma balloon, all the magma came out, then the land fell down into the water. So the caldera is now filled with water at Santorini.
It's an interesting concept to try to describe, and I think that's a great question. And hopefully soon we'll have some pictures that we can show what that looks like, because I think that's another thing that's also both scientifically very interesting and also quite beautiful.
Absolutely, yeah.
So Connor has a very nice question. He is wondering if you have made friends aboard the ship.
Yeah, that's such a good question. I was worried about that. You know, you go on a ship for 2 months and you don't know anybody. But yes, I have made a lot of friends. All of the scientists are very nice, and I have a little group of people that I eat dinner with every night. So yeah, I've made some good friends, and I hope that they're friends that I will keep up with long after we get off the boat.
Fantastic. That's great. In Miss Stevens' class, Emma would like to know, or you touched on this briefly, but is this your first voyage on a boat?
It is my first voyage on a boat. Yeah, I was very excited. I spent a lot of time reading books about the ocean when I was growing up, so I'm super happy to finally have gotten out here and seen what it's like.
Fantastic. Also from Miss Stevens' class, Lance would like to know if you also study the animals near the volcanic locations that you are visiting.
That's a really good question. We don't study big animals, at least not on this expedition. Other types of scientific research vessels do study animals. We are studying bacteria, though. We're studying some of the bacteria that live way down underneath the ocean in these different locations. But actually, the person who's leading that research isn't on the ship yet. She's going to come on just for the very last part of the expedition. So I don't have a lot of facts to share about that yet, but once she gets on board, then I'll learn a lot about the little bacteria that live under the sea.
Fantastic. Great question. We're welcoming a third class to the live stream, Mr. Tomlinson's class. Hello from Pennsylvania. Mr. Tomlinson's class was wondering, what is the most surprising thing you and the scientific team have found so far when collecting these samples?
Oh, actually, we found a lot of really exciting things, but I can't tell you too much about them just yet because we're actually operating on what's called a scientific moratorium, which is really exciting. It's because we're collecting all these samples, and the scientists, in order to kind of show the people that gave them money to do this, show them what they've done and share their work with other scientists, they have to write up a big scientific publication. But they want to get that done before other people study the samples that we're collecting. So they get a year's time to do that. And during that time, we all have to keep all of these fun facts secret. But we've learned a lot about kind of the ages of the volcanoes that we're studying. And that's important because sometimes the magma kind of moves around in this area. So you might have eruptions from one place for a while and then it moves to another place. So that's one of the things that the scientists are studying. And we've learned a lot about that we'll tell everybody as soon as we can.
Great. Well, maybe you can sort of answer in more detail one of their follow-up questions, which is, what is the biggest rock or sample you've collected? I know when you're drilling, everything's sort of the same circumference. It comes up in the tube, right? But how long of a core sample, or how deep are you drilling, perhaps?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the tube that we bring up is 10 meters long, which is about 30 feet long. It's really big. It takes about 5 people to carry it when it first comes up. It gets cut down into shorter sections that we can work with a little bit easier right after we bring it up onto the catwalk. So we have had samples that we brought up that were completely full with like a hard rock. That's probably the biggest. Sometimes you'll have more of a mud, or you'll have rocks that are kind of broken up into little sections. And we've drilled to about, I think, like 860 meters below the seafloor on this expedition, which is pretty deep. It's actually not very deep as far as our boat is capable of. But before we go on an expedition, there's an environmental study to make sure it's safe for us to drill into a place. So that's how deep they said we could drill. And if we wanted to drill deeper, we'd have to ask to make sure it's safe before we do that.
Fantastic. Thank you. Another question from Miss Turney's class. Helen is wondering if you've seen any animals, either while you've been sort of parked and drilling, or on your way from Spain to Greece.
Yeah, the coolest thing so far has been that we've seen some dolphins and I think some porpoises also. But I saw the dolphins, other people saw the porpoises. So that was really cool. That was just one morning. I got up and I was having my coffee on the deck, and I was watching the sunrise, and all of a sudden I saw those little like dolphin fins as they were jumping, and they were pretty close to the boat. I was hoping they would stick around for a little bit, but they did kind of swim away very fast. So that was amazing.
All right. Very cool. Animals are always very, very exciting. Very high interest, of course. All right. In Miss Turney's class, George would like to know, we've already touched on that, George. If the question is whether you're also studying animals or just rocks, and we're really focused on rocks and sediments with this expedition. Roxy is wondering if the science team ever does any sort of like a submarine dive once you find something, or if there's any other way that you're exploring besides using that amazing drill that you showed us.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Mostly on this trip, we're just using the drill. That's kind of this boat's specialties. It's one of the things that makes our boat unique is that it's set up to do this one thing really, really well. Some other scientific boats have less stuff in their labs all the time. They kind of switch out duties. But the other part of the answer is that we do have some of those little underwater remote controlled submarine things that we can drive around. We mostly use those if we need to see what's going on with the drill underneath the water, like maybe it gets stuck or we're just unsure if things are going properly. So we do sometimes drive that around. We haven't done that yet on this expedition, but I'm kind of hoping that we do because it would be really cool to see that happen.
Excellent. Well, we've got a student who's on camera who would love to ask you her question face to face. So I'm going to bring her in. Love to ask you her question. I hear my voice in the background. Hi, Mrs. Capice's class. How are you? Love to ask you her question. I hear my voice in the background. Hi, Mrs. Capice's class. How are you? Maybe you can use your speaker or your microphone, probably your speaker for just a minute.
1 second, it's glitching. Is the wildlife disturbed by the work you are doing?
That's a great question. We actually do a bunch of environmental studies to make sure we're not going to hurt any wildlife before we start drilling. Because the drill itself it looks really big, but it's not very thick in diameter. So we normally don't, hit any wildlife, and we try not to disturb any wildlife homes. We pick where we're going to drill really carefully to make sure we don't do that. I don't know whether Tim has been able to share this yet, but we do have a funny video of a squid swimming into our drill pipe. It was fine. It swam away, but it was kind of funny to see because it was very wide in the ocean, and I don't know how it managed to run into the drill pipe.
I did. I shared the video of the squid running into the pipe. If you go onto, let me get it up here real quick. If you go into Sarah's Virtual Exchange articles and you go into an album, one of the first albums she published, there's a hilarious video of a squid just coming out of the side of the screen and bonking right into the drill pipe. It looked like it was okay. It was just kind of like if you bumped into a wall or something. It was actually quite funny. So make sure you check it out. And fantastic question. Any other questions from Mrs. Capice's class while we have you on the screen?
Go ahead. One more, it looks like.
Great.
How long have you been studying science?
Oh, that's another good question. I'm trying to think. I studied science in college for 4 years, and then I was in grad school for, I think, 3 more years, so I guess 7 years. But then since then, it's been probably another 4 or 5 years of studying science more as a writer. So I work with journalists a lot. So I get to learn and study a lot of different kinds of science now. So maybe about 10 years in total.
Thank you.
Yeah, great question, Ms. Capice's class. Thank you so much for joining us on camera. Great questions, students. Sarah, we have just questions pouring in from the chat. So we're going to sort of go maybe rapid fire and get through some of these questions. Okay. Helen in Miss Turney's class is curious what you received for your Secret Santa. And I know you discussed it in your article, but maybe you can reveal for us your amazing Secret Santa gift here again.
Yeah, it was a great gift. I got, I think, 2 different types of chips. One was kind of a version of Cheetos from Spain. One was just some Doritos that are normal, the kind that we would see in the supermarket in the US. And then I got some pistachios and a couple more chocolate bars, which was really great. layer to add to my stash. If you've seen what I packed on the trip, I packed a lot of chocolate because it's important to me.
That sounds like an amazing surprise to get from your Secret Santa. Roxy would like to know if you get to swim at any point, or if you've been off the ship swimming in that beautiful Mediterranean Sea.
Oh, I've wanted to so badly because we've had a lot of really good weather and the water has been really warm. But actually, even though we've had a lot of days where it's pretty calm, there can still be really strong currents that might pull people away. So the captain hasn't let us get off the boat, sadly, to go swimming. But I would love to, and I'm hoping it'll still be very warm when we get off the ship in February so that we can maybe dip our toes in the water on the island.
All right, fantastic. You mentioned the use of a 3D printer. Why do you have a 3D printer on the ship? Do you use it for something related to the drill under normal circumstances?
That's a really good question. Not so much related to the drill because the parts that we're printing with our 3D printer are a little bit more fragile than what we could use for the drill, but we do use it to make smaller parts for a lot of the scientific instruments that are on board. Because we're so far away from land, if something breaks, we pretty much have to have the capability to, well, you might be like, oh, we're not far away from land. Normally the ship is really far away from land, so there's no chance of getting a resupply. This is kind of unusual to be as close to land as we are on this trip. So we have to be able to fix anything that could break on the ship without any resupplies. So that's why we have the 3D printer and we use it to fix scientific instruments a lot of the time.
Excellent. We have two sort of questions, or I guess requests for more clarity around how much you work each day. Question from Mr. Tomlinson's class, question from Ms. Turney's class. I think you said 12 hours a day, is that right?
Yeah. So I start my shift at 6 in the morning and I get off at 6 at night. And so most of that time I'm doing work. Sometimes I'll take breaks, I'll talk with my friends, we'll get some cookies. We have 2 cookie breaks throughout the day in addition to our normal meals. We do have some downtime sometimes. It's not always, nose to the grindstone working hard. But there is a lot of work to get done and not a lot of time to do it in. So everybody on board works 12 hours every single day.
Great. That sounds like a lot of fun, but also could be a little tiring. I'm glad you have cookie breaks at a minimum to take a break every once in a while. Fantastic. So Mr. Tomlinson's students would like to know how you learned about this expedition and why you wanted to be a part of it.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I learned about it through some of my professional networks. So since I do a lot of writing about science, I'm in a couple of different groups of other people who write about science. And someone posted about it and I thought, oh, wow, I've never wanted to do anything more in my entire life. I hadn't necessarily thought of going to sea before this, but as soon as I saw the advertisement that they needed people to be educators on board the ship, I remembered how much I'd read about ships growing up, and I thought, wow, such a cool experience. You don't get to go to sea on this type of ship very often. I know a lot of people go on cruise ships, but it's a little different to be at sea for quite this period of time without ever getting off the boat.
Yes, absolutely. I wish you could see these questions flooding in from Ms. Capisi's class, Ms. Turney's class, Ms. Tomlinson's class. They have so many other fantastic questions. We're going to keep getting to them. I want to pause just for a minute, though, and remind everyone that we have 2 more live streams with Sara throughout the rest of this expedition, and maybe possibly a third one. We're going to go into the laboratories aboard the ship. We're going to get to see around the ship a little bit more and certainly dive more into the science of the Hellenic Arc Volcanic Field Expedition. So we're going to get a lot more into those topics, both through the future articles that Sara's writing for her virtual exchange with Reach the World, and through these live streams where you can ask her these fun questions that expand on what you've learned through her articles. So keep the great questions coming. There's a lot more to go with this virtual exchange. Savannah and Miss Turney's class would like to know sort of what's a typical day like for you? And another question from Carolyn and Ms. Turney's classes, what's your favorite non-work thing to do on the ship during that time?
Oh, those are good questions. I'm not a morning person for the most part, so I kind of screech out of bed only 45 minutes, half an hour before I'm supposed to start my shift. So I get up, I'm like doing my initial emails, then I'll take a little bit of a break. I drink a lot of coffee. That's probably one of my worst, habits is drinking too much caffeine. So I have little coffee breaks throughout the morning. I spend a lot of time working with scientists on giving tours of the laboratories that are here on board the ship. So I spend a lot of time doing that. I spend a lot of time setting up those tours and answering emails. I also run the social media for the ship. So I take a lot of pictures and I write a lot of tweets and Instagram posts and things like that. And then I'm also working with a lot of journalists. That's what I do with my full-time job when I'm not on the ship. And so I'm doing a lot of emailing different journalists to tell them about what we're doing and see if they're interested in talking to the scientists on board. And I work with the scientists to make sure that they are ready to talk to the journalists, because some people feel a little bit nervous before they talk to a journalist. So I help them to practice and get ready and feel confident as they're talking to journalists. So once I get off, like once I'm done with my work, I spend a long time at dinner hanging out with my friends, usually about an hour or an hour and a half, because we all kind of get off of our work shift around the same time. So that's our free time. And then I don't really have access to a lot of movies. There are some on board the ship that are, like they've downloaded that we can watch. But I end up kind of just going back to my room and reading after I've hung out with my friends. And that's been actually really calming and nice. It's been a little bit of a good break from social media. Even though I do a lot of social media during the day, I try to kind of take a break in the evening and do reading.
Okay, good. I'm going to compile 2 questions that you may be able to answer fairly quickly. Has there been any fishing off the side of the ship? And has anybody gone scuba diving as a part of this expedition?
Oh, those are great questions. We can't fish off the side of the boat anymore. People used to do that a lot. But if we did a dry dock, so that's when you lift the boat you put the boat in some place where you can take all the water out, I think is a more accurate description of dry dock. Sometimes you have to do that to make sure that the bottom of the boat is still safe and everything's working. And when they did that, they found a bunch of fishing lines snarled in one of the motors that we use to keep the boat in place. So we have big motors in the back that help us go forwards. But we also have motors along the sides of the boat that help us stay in place while we're doing our drilling. Anyway, because they found the fishing line snarled in one of the motors, they said no more fishing off the side, sadly. And we have not gone scuba diving either. I'm not sure whether we ever do that from this particular boat, but I really wish that we did, because that would be a lot of fun.
You shared on one of your Reach the World articles a great sort of visual tour of the ship, some of the highlights, your favorite places on the ship. Luke in Miss Stevens' class would like to know if there is a swimming pool on the ship, and also, is the ship primarily a work ship?
Yeah, those are great questions. There's not a swimming pool like you might imagine in a gym or outside. There is a big opening in the bottom of the boat that's called the moon pool. And that's where the drill pipes go from that big tower that we saw down into the ocean. Apparently people used to swim in that a long time ago, but because of more modern safety regulations, we aren't allowed to swim in that, sadly. There's just not, we're so close to the water, but there's not a lot of swimming that goes on, unfortunately. And I forgot, what was the other question?
Is it primarily a work ship?
Oh, yes, it is primarily a work ship. It's pretty much set up to do this one thing, to drill for these samples from the bottom of the ocean. And so every 2 months, we have different groups of scientists that are studying a different thing come on board. So the ship just moves around the world with different groups of people working on it all the time.
Fantastic. I have what I think may be a very easy question for you, and it is, Mackenzie would like to know if you have reliable internet service, and Roxy would like to know if you're able to stay in touch with your family.
Yeah, great questions. Most of the time the internet is reliable, but every now and then, kind of with no warning, it will just go poof, and all of a sudden you'll be trying to update your Instagram or check your emails and it'll just be nothing. That's because we get our internet through a satellite system, so sometimes it's just a wonky connection, or we're pointed in a weird direction, or something breaks and we just won't have internet for a couple hours. But it usually comes on pretty quickly. We have 2 people that their whole job is to work on the IT network on the boat. One works at night, one works during the day on those 12-hour shifts. So problems get solved pretty quickly. And because we have fairly reliable internet, we're able to use video chats with our family. We're able to send sort of internet-based text messages. If you've heard of programs like WhatsApp or things like, Facebook Messenger, we can use to send messages to our family. So we are able to stay in touch.
Fantastic. That's nice to hear. All right, next question. Brooklyn would like to know if you have any pets at home, and if so, who is taking care of them while you're on this epic adventure?
That's a great question. Yeah, I don't have pets, sadly. I've been doing a lot of traveling over the past couple of years, so I want to get a cat, maybe a dog in the future, but I don't have one right now because I figured I wasn't ready to take care of one yet. However, a lot of people on the ship do have pets. We actually have what's called a pet wall where we print off pictures of everybody's pets. So we put them up on the wall in case people are missing their own pets. And a lot of times people have their family members take care of those or their friends taking care of those pets while they're gone.
Fantastic. I'm going to speak for our entire student audience and say that if you can get us a picture of the pet wall, that would be something we'd be very interested in seeing for a future Reach the World article. All right, we're in the last sort of 4 or 5 minutes of our time together. Sarah, you've got other things to do. In fact, you are in Greece and it is not morning like it is in most of the United States right now, but it is what time where you are right now?
It is just about 6 p.m. right now, so pretty soon I'm going to go eat dinner with my friends, which I'm excited about.
Fantastic. And is the sun still up?
Let's see. It looks like it might be mostly down now. We can check if you want to.
Yeah, we're going to get a good look outside the ship next time, so we don't need to push our luck today and risk this wonderful internet connection that we're enjoying and this nice conversation. But next time we'll see sort of the environment around the ship. You're in your office right now, and we'll be a little more mobile and we'll get to tour the ship. Just a few final questions here. Are yourself or any of the science team using any underwater photography to capture details about the drilling operation or what you're investigating beneath the ship?
Ooh, we aren't this time, but we actually used a previous expedition that went and took a lot of measurements when we were planning this one. So I think I told you we had to get approval to drill in these places before we could do it to make sure it was safe. So they sent a previous expedition with one of those underwater remote controlled submarines, went and looked at some of the places we were going to drill, and they did a lot of seismic measurements where they used sound to study the contours of what was underneath the ground before we drilled into it. So we had some problems with the drill where it was getting a little bit stuck, and they used footage from that previous underwater submarine to look at some of the places we were drilling into to try to figure out why that was happening. So we used some underwater data that was taken before, but we haven't done it ourselves.
Okay, very interesting. Great questions from students today. I'm loving all these questions. I can tell that they're learning a lot from the articles you're writing, and these questions are showing so much curiosity. There's so much to learn about this exciting expedition and what you're doing, even just what it's like to be an explorer on a ship-based expedition. Do you have any tips? And this is Savannah asking for Ms. Turney's class. Do you have any tips for others, especially I'm assuming Savannah and others who might be interested in this cool work that you're doing and joining expeditions like this?
Yeah, I think one thing, I don't know, when I was picking out a type of science to study, because typically when you go to college to study science, you sort of choose a specialty a little bit. You don't always have to. You can kind of choose some of the broader ones. But if you end up studying geology or earth sciences or something like that, there's a lot of types of field work. So if you're really interested in going on these sorts of cool expeditions and things like that, I would say maybe think about earth science, see if you like it, read some books about it. And as far as other funny tips, I'm trying to think. I feel like I didn't need to pack as many clothes as I thought that I would. I didn't pack a lot of clothes, but if all of the other ships that you're sailing on are like this one, you have a lot of access to people to help you do your laundry really quickly. So that would give you even more room for snacks if you pack fewer clothes. Snacks are the important part because you get to the month 2 and you really are missing some of the food at home.
All right, excellent. We have just a handful, maybe 2 questions quick. Carter wants to know if you've seen sharks.
Oh, I have not seen sharks, but I really want to.
All right, so no sharks yet. Mateo would like to know if you know when the JOIDES Resolution was built.
Yeah, it was built in 1978. It's actually pretty old, and it was converted into a scientific ship in 1984.
Okay, very good. All right. So I'm going to reshare, sort of as a final thing here, the link to all of Sarah's amazing articles that she's been writing from the ship. If you're interested in seeing and hearing a little more about how she spent the holidays aboard the JOIDES Resolution, some of the first drilling sites that the ship has gone to, some more details, that's where all those articles are being published. We'd love to have you check them out. They're going to give you some great background for future live stream calls with Sarah, which I'm very much looking forward to, especially as we explore the science labs. And with that, I think it's time for us to say goodbye to Sarah. The time has gone so fast. I feel like this 45 minutes has gone by in a wink. Like I've hinted at before, we're going to have at least 2 more chances to connect live with Sarah and ask her your questions about volcanoes, living and working on the JOIDES Resolution, whatever your curious minds want to know. So put in your calendar. Our next live stream will be Wednesday, January 25th, in just a little over a week at 1:00 p.m. Eastern. Until then, Sarah, thank you so much. Please let the entire Hellenic Arc Volcanic Field Expedition team know that we're rooting for you all. You have lots of supporters from Reach the World classrooms, and we will see you next time. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. It was so much to talk with you all and to hear your questions. It'll be fun to show you a few of the other scientists who are on board when we walk around the labs. That'll be a lot of fun.
Fantastic. See you all soon, everyone. Have a great week. Bye.